I like salad. Do you like salad?
Hi, I'm Ho Shun Ho. I'm living in Vancouver, BC, Canada, unceded territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I'm an immigrant to Canada from China.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrea, coming to you from Victoria, but more importantly known as unceded Akwesasne territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, and I am an immigrant from the United States of America. And you're listening to
Canadian Salad.
Canadian Salad. Welcome back, everyone, to another Tuesday, another episode. Big news has happened in the world, whether we pay attention to it or not. I am here as I am. Hoshin is having fun in New Zealand, you know, just wearing his crop tops and enjoying the sun, which I'm very jealous. But I've invited a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, an immigrant to Canada, an immigrant from the States. So we, surprise everyone, we're going to be processing Trump's election and its impact on immigration. Hi, Tabitha. Welcome to the
Andrea.
episode.
The episode we never wanted to run.
No, we never did. But I roped you in, and here you are. My thanks to you.
I meant more like we didn't want cause to have this episode, not that I would want to be here with you, because I talk about anything with you.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Talking about this and offering maybe perspective from two Americans who are living in Canada, and really just the impact and the fear and the anxiety that we have, knowing that so many in the States and even in Canada have regarding a second Trump term. So if your head is under a rock and you didn't know, November 5th, the United States reelected Donald J. Trump to be the 47th president of the United States. Is it 47?
First felon.
First felon. Yeah. Hey, lots of firsts. First leader to have immunity from the Supreme Court. Tabitha, could you what were your reflections, or what are your thoughts about even Trump's reelection and its impact on Canada? Because you were here in Canada when he was elected the first time. Is that correct?
I was. Yeah. Okay. I remember. Man, I remember when it was still a joke. You know,
right.
It's, oh, please, how silly, this reality TV star running for president. And I remember everyone just being like, oh, there's no way that guy will be taken seriously. And then I remember I went on a road trip through Washington, rural Washington.
Okay.
And I just saw all these signs. And I'm thinking, Washington, that's like a blue state. That's very liberal. And I just saw signs everywhere for him. And it suddenly hit me like, oh, this is a possibility. And there's something deeply wrong. It really felt like a time when, you know, in The Wizard of Oz, when they get a peek behind the curtain.
Oh, sure.
That's how it felt to me. It was
like
the
wizard. Yeah.
Oh, it's always been here. This rhetoric, this racism, this misogyny, like it's always been there, but we used to hide it behind a curtain.
Yeah.
And now like it's fluttered in the wind and we've seen behind it. And yeah, I just had this dread of, I think he might win. And everyone was like, no, there's no way. There's no possible way. And then you remember every like scandal that would come out. People who used to know him, the whole grab him by the pussy recording. And you're like, that's it. It's over. He will make it. And he did. And so I remember that first time, the next morning, just being so sick inside.
Yeah.
And it was really cold out where I lived. And I opened all the windows. And I lived right next to a little inlet on Vancouver Island. So the water was very still. And there was fog. And I remember playing Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream, like the whole speech, and just blasting it. And it was like echoing off the water.
Wow. Wow.
And it was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Like the world's ending is how it felt.
Yeah.
And it didn't stop feeling that way for 4 years.
It didn't. It didn't. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, because second term, what do you think it will do for Canada, or at least for this sentiment here?
I feel like there's one thing that the US is really good at, and that is exporting our ideologies.
Yeah.
My husband is from Europe, and he's always said the US makes things cool. That's what you guys do. Whether it be like movies or niche interests, like anything can gain a foothold in the States. You can always find an audience for anything, flat earthers, they have conferences, that kind of thing.
Yes,
and
they do.
Whereas a lot of times in Europe, it's just everything's small, and with the different languages, it's hard to find your audience in the same way. And so the US, we export things, and it feels like we export our hatred.
Yeah. Yeah.
We normalize it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We legitimize it.
We don't regulate it. We just let it be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember immigrating to Canada under the diversity is our strength era of Trudeau, where Canada at the time was bringing in a lot of Syrian families because of the war. And it was a refreshing narrative compared to the States, where there was just all of this illegal aliens and illegal immigrants and Mexicans are this and all of this. So I just felt like, okay, Canada at least is doing something better and different. Unfortunately, I feel like even with Trump's first presidency ending, I feel like because he had that position and platform and that megaphone never really went away. I feel like it continued. And what it's done is that, like you said, it exported to Canada. And I see things happening in Canada, and we're going to explore it a little bit today, where it's the same playbook, just a different cover. It doesn't say by Trump in the United States. It says by the Conservative Party and Canada. I feel like it is going to increase violence towards communities of color, towards immigrants, towards people with sexual diverse identities. And I think there's just going to be a lot of lack of accountability. I think when you platform someone so high, like unfortunately, one of the most powerful positions in the world is the US presidency. And when you platform someone who has no accountability for anything he says, does, that enables people who want also that lack of accountability, who don't want the checks and balances, who don't want to be held responsible to their statements or their actions. And I've seen it in the political races that have so far gone on in Canada, where politicians will say something, well, I didn't mean that. Or I'm so sorry that phrase was said. I'm so appalled, but nothing happens or changes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think with how the world has changed through COVID happening and the increase in the costs of the cost of living have astronomically increased. It creates this vortex, I want to say, where people are desperate for change. People are scared about not having enough. And that's a legitimate fear, but it's so easily weaponized. And so then again, we look down south because the South makes things cool. And there's this idea of we should be more like that. We should have more policies. We start looking around, and instead of saying who is hoarding all the resources, we look at vulnerable people who may have just arrived from perhaps war-torn countries, perhaps just places where they didn't have as many opportunities. And we look at the poorest people and we think they're the problem, instead of looking at the owners of grocery stores.
Right. The private land developers who seize up a third of the new builds that are going up. Yeah. And then charge astronomical prices. Yeah.
And so I think Trump legitimizes looking at vulnerable populations who are just desperate to survive and live like you and I and support their families. And they're just easy targets. They're easy targets to direct our hate. and to claim that they're the problem, that we, can barely afford rent or groceries.
Exact
instead of
scapegoat.
looking at the real
Actual
culprit.
concrete. Yeah. I appreciate all of that. And I think everything that you and I have reflected, we're going to point out as to the reality on the ground. And Tabitha has listened to some of the episodes, and some of you might be new, but I love data. We love information so that you all know we're not just pulling stuff out of our noses, because there's a lot of people doing that in other places and spreading lies and misinformation. This is not that podcast. So we're going to go look real quickly at where Canada was in regards to immigration before Trump was reelected on November 5th. So our last episode 10, we talked about Trudeau's immigration cuts. And one thing that we highlighted was that it was a study according to Reuters back in September. 65% of Canadians surveyed believe that the Canadian government's current immigration plans will admit too many people. They think that high immigration rates are contributing to the housing crisis and stresses on healthcare, and calling Canada's immigration policy, quote, too generous. So that was in September, which that's the highest in anti-immigration that Canada's had. In 2022, the pro-immigration stance was the highest it had ever been. So I think there's a direct relationship when you look at the South and marketing itself, exporting these ideas that Trump and the United States have exported. There was an Omni poll in October 2024, which actually surveyed immigrants and their voting prospects and where they're looking at things. And this touches a bit on what you were talking about, Tabitha, is that a lot of people want change. They're tired of really high groceries. They're tired of housing being unaffordable. They want that job. What's interesting in this Omni poll, they surveyed immigrants. And immigrants, they said, are tired of the lack of opportunities. And there was a 6% increase for immigrants to vote for conservatives. So which was shocking to me, because I thought, one, do they not know the Conservative Party's plan? Which we did talk about this in our Vote-tober special. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that people want change. And they look at the current party and they think they're not doing anything to help me get a job or to have my skills at least recognized and utilized in this country. Maybe this guy who sounds smooth and like he cares, maybe this guy will do it for me. So that's something to keep in mind, because it wasn't just white people in the States that voted for Trump. There were a lot of Latinx people. There were a lot of immigrants who voted for him. So we just have to keep that in mind. Yeah. Unfortunately, that rise in anti-immigrant and anti-newcomer hate actually showed increase in hate crimes. So in 2023, 44.5% of hate incidents in Canada were motivated by race or ethnicity, with South Asian and Black people facing higher rates of hate threats and assaults. And we also see high crime rates against Muslims or Arab people. There's a really great article that, it's from globalextremism.org, and they are a international body that looks at global racism abroad and in different countries. And the Great Replacement Theory, which, are you aware of what that is, Tabitha?
That's the idea that white people are slowly being erased. We're going to be a minority, which I think we are a minority in the world.
We already are in the world. 85%. We make it like 15% of the world. Anyway, we digress. But yes, you're right. So the Great Replacement Theory was, I believe, something that really surfaced around the time of World War I and II, when Hitler, the ruler of Germany, was trying to get people to hate a certain class of people. And they weren't just trying to hate Jewish people, but they hated people with disabilities. They hated people from different religions. They hated people who were sexually identified themselves as different. So it was anyone who wasn't the pure German in those notes. So there was a researcher with the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, Peter Smith, says, quote, "There is definitely a trend within the far-right spaces, particularly in Canada, of targeting South Asian communities and individuals for derision. They are making them the focus of a lot of anti-immigrant narratives, and we're seeing the phrase, 'they have to go back,' being deployed a lot," end quote. And so this isn't the States, everyone. This is Canada. And I think that we really have to drive that point home, because as much as we think, oh, Canada's not like America, The minute you rest on your laurels and think we're fine is the minute that we let our guard down and we get kicked in the stomach, right? If we're not standing our ground and we don't have our shields up, or if we're not planning and expecting these fringe movements, these conservative spaces or far right spaces, and thinking they'll just go away if we ignore it, they see the playbook in the South and they know that they're empowered. And they're connected.
In some ways, I think the culture in Canada, we're so nice, you know? We don't start anything. We're so polite. We're non-confrontational. Like, those can be wonderful things, but they can also contribute to a bystander effect where we don't intervene when we see something, or we get really caught up in being a good person. And so we don't recognize the ways we actually might be perpetuating things like racism or misogyny, because our identity isn't being the good guy. So we're not used to having to search our own hearts and our own lives for where might we be contributing to this problem.
Absolutely. And I love that word bystander, because I do feel like that's where the politicians right now in Canada are just, it's going to be fine, that bystander mentality. Approval rating in Canada for Trump overall grew from 15% in 2020 to 21% in 2024. This is when he's not president, and his approval rating went up. Wow. And this is from Environics Institute 2024. And there's been an increase in support from Conservative Party. And they have been stating, it was BC Conservative John Rustad, who a while ago made the statement that the 2020 elections were indeed stolen, the school shootings have been fake, and that there needs to be huge caps and cuts on immigration. It's already here, as much as we would like to say, no, it's not.
And it's not just a side eye of, oh no, things are getting more expensive. Maybe we don't have enough to share. It's like blatant misinformation.
It is.
Conspiracy theories.
Yes.
Just things that are rather unhinged. And it reminds me of a quote, which I would love to properly attribute, but I don't know who said it, but it was something along the lines of, we will believe the most ridiculous things about people that we've already chosen to hate.
That's absolutely the sentiment. I mean, and I touched this on the last episode, but Canada hasn't always been pro-immigrant, at least not pro-immigrant towards people who are not white. And so to think that it went away, or that somehow it just died out and that's not who we are anymore. I mean, I think that is very foolish thinking, to think that, oh, this is not who we are. But you created a country based on that. So I don't know how you do anything different unless you radically change your system.
Absolutely. Right? And when if you look at Canada's first sin against Indigenous people. And how we have not righted those wrongs. We have not held people responsible. We have not fulfilled truth and reconciliation. Like, it's easy to think, we're so open, we're so accepting. Look at how we're so nice to immigrants. You know, we're so welcoming. But it's like behind the scenes, we have this secret. And then as soon as it's not convenient anymore, then we stop being that welcome to the immigrant. I'm talking about the narrative more than what might be on the ground. Yeah. And I think advocating for immigration for a lot of people doesn't cost them anything, in the way that advocating for people to be attentive and work collectively for Indigenous rights costs people a lot. Yeah.
And I think if you're at all not going to be mindful or aware or advocating for the people who were already here, there is no reason, absolutely no reason you would advocate for people who come.
Yeah.
Right? Ontario. So Doug Ford is the Conservative minister there in Ontario. And this just came out today or yesterday. Today's November 10th, this recording. Ontario just barred international students from medical schools. So starting in 2026 in Ontario, if you are an international student, you will be denied going to school for a medical profession.
With the doctor shortage we have?
Thank you. And do you know how many foreign students account for all medical school students in Ontario? Do you know the percentage?
I do not.
It's not even 1%. It's 0.26.
Wow.
How's
that even legal?
That's the very good question. And I think that's a very good question to be going forward, because a lot of what we're seeing in the immigration process, with whether it was Trudeau's cuts, whether it's like the caps on students coming in, whether it's the limited spouse worker permits, there's a limited number of worker permits. So if you bring your spouse, they may or may not be able to work while you go to school. There's just all of these reactionary things that honestly are just setting up the stage for what people want to do when the federal election happens next year. And that's my theory. But just ridiculous things like that. So I think it's important, because I think for a lot of Canadians, people just still look at Trump and laugh. I mean, when Trump was saying that Haitian immigrants were eating dogs, the whole world laughed because they thought it was just so stupid, right? That's ridiculous. Or, oh, that's so funny that he would do that. And we made jokes. And the media made, just focused on that, but never rebutted it. Never had Haitian immigrants saying, this is who we are. And I see the media in Canada operating the same way, right? We're not listening to immigrants. We're not putting them front and center. They're not on the evening news, right? They're the subject, but they're not the speaker. They're not the person who's going to counter, or at least give a perspective that's different than the sentiment that is being made against them.
They're like a punchline. And it's so dehumanizing and outrageous that we might shrug, but like not realizing how that kind of rhetoric affects, not just influences hate crimes, which, as you've already shared, there's a rise in those, but also just the effect that must have on people's psyches.
Of course.
To be the punchline of a joke, to be so belittled, and to have others be afraid of you. It's so cruel. It's unspeakably cruel.
It is. And I don't think that if we don't take it seriously, if we don't recognize it and call it for what it is, then we'll just allow what Trump wants to allow to happen. So it's going to get a little bit heavy. So I'm going to go into really what Trump has proposed doing for anti-immigration and to decrease immigration levels. And I really want us to pay attention, and then we'll go into how that will impact Canada and what Canada has done before and what Canada potentially will do again with these new promises. This is out of the New York Times, and this is outlined in Project 2025, but it's also been voiced at his rallies. So Mr. Trump wants to build huge camps to detain immigrants while their cases are processed and they await deportation flights. And they said that they will use military funds to create these camps, these indefinite holding spaces for people. And what scares me about that, Tabitha,
is we've already done that before.
Yeah.
To Japanese people.
Hitler did it to the Jewish people. No other country took them in, which is, we're going to get into Canada and its responsibility and its role in this. But they're just left there indefinitely. What do you do with that many people? We're talking like 15 million people. It's scary. It's downright scary. Visas of foreign students who participated in anti-Israel and pro-Palestine protests would be deported. Naturalized citizens could be deported. Safe status refugees would be revoked. Afghan refugees, so there was a lot of Afghan refugees that came when the U.S. withdrew. The U.S. also granted safe entry for a lot of Afghani people because they had nowhere to go and they were permitted to the States. They could be sent back. The birthright citizenship that Canada has and the U.S. has will basically end for those babies born to undocumented parents. If parents were undocumented and they had a baby, they're not a citizen, you're all going back, or you're all going into this camp.
So their baby has no country.
No country, stateless.
Yeah.
And so no country will, on paper, legally take them in. And that's why I think after the election happened, I was shocked and I felt sick to my stomach and I felt angry. And I think I have friends who are in close community and in close relationships with illegal immigrants, who are in close relationship with refugees who have been given asylum, whether that's from the southern parts of Mexico, Latin America, or whether that's parts of Iraq or Syria or Lebanon or even parts of Africa. And it's really important that we remember what Trump has said and that we take it seriously. Because yes, he's a liar, but there's a lot of things he does not lie about. And when it comes to racist remarks and racism and annihilating people and committing basically a genocide, he's very serious. If we look at what Canada did the first election, I feel like we will understand what Canada will do again. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I don't see any politicians ringing the alarm bells, right? So during Trump's first election, there was an increase in asylum seekers from the US to Canada because there was, again, xenophobia and then threats of deportation. That was something that Trump had proclaimed and had said. There were near to, I believe the number is about 10,000 refugees claimed asylum in Canada during Trump's presidency. And these were Somali refugees, Ghanaian, Latin American, Haitian, and they were going through a certain border on foot in the dead of winter. And Canada wasn't expecting it. Some people lost their toes because of frostbite. Some people died in their travel to Canada, made it very dangerous. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. No one's going to risk everything if they know that everything is already so dangerous. And these people did. I don't know if very many people know, but Canada does have a safe third country agreement. And it's a safe third country agreement with the United States. And the agreement says that you have to make asylum or refugee claim in the country that you arrived in, like the original country, right? So let's say you're from Haiti, you land in the United States. That is the country that you have to make asylum into. If you are denied, Canada will deny you as well. Because if that safe country, quote unquote, safe country denied you, then of course there's a reason and we won't accept you. Canadian Council for Refugees has advocated for a really long time to have this agreement totally revoked because the United States is not safe for refugees. And Canada is starting to become the same way. After the election night, there was an increase in people Googling how to move to Canada, a 5,000% increase. Like people are desperate. When Trump was elected, Trudeau congratulated Trump and Poilievre looked forward to saving jobs and saving Canada, end quote. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland stated that Canada will be fine. Trudeau revived a committee to engage with the U.S. and Trump, he created a committee because we won't get into the details, but there's like the NAFTA agreement that was almost totally ripped up. Trump almost ruined that agreement with Canada and Mexico. And so Trudeau had made a committee to engage with the Trump presidency. That committee hasn't been in action during Biden's term, obviously, because Biden is predictable, but Trump is not. And already
let's hope they've been plotting behind the scenes in preparation.
Oh gosh. And that's just it. RCMP, as far as like planning, RCMP is increasing its plans and strategies to respond to the influx of asylum seekers to Canada. Beyond a shadow of doubt, people believe Trump as well, and they see that something could happen and it could be catastrophic. And what do we do? How do we respond? On paper, this damn agreement says that they were refugees there. They have to go back. But go back to what? Camps? I mean, it should cause all of us to be panicked. And knowing that what happened in 1942 Germany could happen again right here on Turtle Island. And the fact that people are just like, Canada's going to be fine. Yeah, if you are a straight white male, you will be fine. You're right. And if Canada is a straight white male, then yeah, Canada will be fine. But Canada's not. Canada has, I think the last time I checked statistics, Canada said that there's over 450 different heart languages that currently reside in Canada. It's a lot of languages. That's a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember, like when people, like the quotes you just read, oh, Canada will be fine. Oh, he doesn't really mean it. It's like people don't vote for someone because they're banking on them not fulfilling their promises.
Exactly.
You vote for someone, you might be skeptical that they'll be able to, but you vote for the person who promises you stuff that you think they can deliver. So it's not out of line. It's not, not being dramatic or hysterical to take these things seriously because they are threats.
Right.
They are threats against vulnerable people. Right. And so for us to just go, oh, that will never be able to happen. Just think of how many things we thought wouldn't happen that happened last time. Exactly. And now so many of the safeguards have been removed.
Yes.
The checks and balances, they're all weighted on one side.
They are. Yeah. And I think Canada, as much as everyone wants to be like, we're not like the States, show me. Then show us. Show us you're not like the States. Show us you're ready to combat and defend immigrants as soon as that anti-immigrant rhetoric comes out. I don't see Mark Miller, the minister of IRCC. I don't see Justin Trudeau or even anyone slamming Doug Ford for his ridiculous anti-immigrant comments. He's blamed immigrants for shootings. Says you need to just leave. If you're going to act like that, you need to go back to where you came from. When there was no proof that immigrants had done it. There already is a lack of accountability from our politicians. And it's frightening. And there are people that I know in Canada who are afraid. People from communities of color, people who have an immigrant status. And I'm just disheartened by it all. And I guess to end this episode, however heavy it is, how can we take care of each other going forward? How can I think immigrants can advocate for themselves all day long. And I think a lot of immigrants do. Unfortunately, they risk a lot by doing so. Yeah. And so I feel like if you're a Canadian-born person, if you are white, this is your opportunity to speak up, speak out, to work hard, to be engaged, to know what's happening, to be, let's get in 10 more podcasts saying the same message. Let's drive the point home. I don't care what it is, but we have to do something because if anything, the United States could be a foreshadowing of what's to come to Canada. Absolutely. I'd love to say that we're above it, but we're not because I haven't seen how we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so tempting to feel powerless or to cast a vote ballot and then go, what else can I do? And that makes a lot of sense. And I feel that way often as well. But I think now is really a time to look to what marginalized communities have been doing all along, which is finding solace together, organizing together, creating community together, caring for vulnerable people together, because there is no guarantee. Our safety, our long-term safety is an illusion. And we have to start forming our own safeguards and our own communities of care, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Would that be your encouragement, Tabitha, going forward? Just how to take care of each other during really uncertain and scary times?
Yeah, I think we have to attend to ourselves and our own hearts first. So first, I would urge anyone to just have some self-compassion. If things feel really overwhelming right now, if things feel scary, if you feel despair, just sitting with that for a little bit. Often there's an urge to bypass all those emotions, but no emotions are bad. They're warning signs. They're telling us, hey, what you're seeing with your eyes, it's really true. And so sitting with those and just having some compassion and acknowledging those feelings and taking care of yourself. I mean, honestly, breathe.
Yeah.
Let your shoulders drop. Give your kids a hug. Take care of your heart, because this is not the time where we want to run around in a frenzy, letting all of our energy just spin out. This is the time where we want to fortify personally and our families so that we can spread that out to our community. So we're not giving from an empty cup, because it might be a really long ride.
That would be my encouragement too, that we just lean in together and just stay engaged and stay aware. You know, I had a friend of mine, she was really frustrated at the last BC election because she saw the narrow margins between a lot of really concrete rights and a lot of things that were on the line, I think, for BC. Mm-hmm. But she said, I never realized how important it is to be engaged. To your point, leaning into those communities of care, those safe spaces, and trying to remain as engaged as possible, putting in those safety nets, writing your local MP, doing what you can with advocacy groups that are doing actual work on the ground and seeing ways that you can be there, because I think there is a lot of comfort when there's strength in number. I mean, you and I have been to protests before, not just in Canada, but in the States. And there's something that's so warm and just so good about knowing that you're not wrestling with these scary things alone, that there are people who are fighting for your back and have got your back and are wanting the same things as you. Yeah. Thank you, Tabitha. Thanks for coming on this with me and for offering your reflections, not only as an immigrant, but as someone who works in those spaces where people are trying to create safety in their own lives. Yeah, I really do value what you had to say. And I hope that if people do feel scared, just write us. You can write hello@canadiansalad.ca. If you're feeling this is really big, if you need community, you know, we can provide that community, however small it is. We're here, Hoshin and I'm sure even Tabitha would love to be there. So thank you, Tabitha. We're going to go into to lighten the heaviness of this topic.
Relax those shoulders,
yes, relax them. Yes, take deep breaths, ground my feet. But we are going to do a Canadian salad pop quiz. For those of you who are new to the episode or to the podcast, Hoshin and I do this on a regular basis where we don't know the question or the answer that the other person is going to ask. And so it provides that dramatique for us to figure that out. And Tabitha, I feel like I've done a lot of the talking. Why don't you go first?
Okay, my pop quiz question for you is, which Canadian city has the largest amount of American immigrants?
Ooh, good question. Which Canadian city? I'm going to say Vancouver.
No.
No?
Nope.
Is it Toronto?
Yes.
Really?
It is.
Okay, Toronto. Oh, wow.
Yep. From my research, Toronto is either like the New York or the Chicago of Canada.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I think Chicago. I've been to both.
Have you? Interesting. Yeah. I haven't been to Chicago. I've been to New York, but that's a good one to know. We'll include the link in our show notes. Okay. So my question to you, Tabitha, is how long is the border between the United States and Canada?
Oh, I'm going to guess 4,000 miles.
4,000 miles. Is that your final answer?
Sure.
All right. You're about 1,525 off. The border between United States and Canada is 5,525 miles.
Okay, that makes sense. There's a lot of coastline and
That's true. Yes, there is. And it's a weird border. If you ever just look at even just above Minnesota, it goes up like a little like a triangle. And there's a really good story behind that, but I can't remember. Look it up. If you're curious, look it up. But yeah, that's our quiz. Tabitha, before you go, and before I do a spiel on where people can find us online, since you are a part of this grand old Canadian salad, what would you be in this salad?
Ooh, I would be a toasted, lightly sweetened walnut or pecan. Pecans are fancier than walnuts.
They taste better too.
They do. They have their place.
They do. Yeah.
But yeah, like a toasted, lightly sugared pecan. Give that crunch.
Ooh, I like it. It's very fancy. It's a very fancy topping.
It elevates the salad. It's really easy to add, and it elevates it a lot.
Like you, friend. Yes.
I just went with what's my favorite part of a salad.
Sure. Why not? But no, that's wonderful. If you would like to follow us, you can follow us on Instagram or on TikTok. You can slide into our DMs. You can read people's comments, however lovely they are. And then every Friday, we do come out with a Dishes Out episode where we dish out against a racist comment, remark, or event that happened. And we try to put those naysayers in their place, keep people accountable in a non-dehumanizing way. That's every Friday, but join us again next week and you'll be hearing with Hoshin. He'll be back. And thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you soon. Bye. Canadian Salad is written and produced in British Columbia, Canada by Hoshin Ho and Andrea McCoy. Theme music is by Naver Avityan from Pixabay.
This has been a good Dranklin production.